I think we can all agree that there's no better feeling than going to the beach for a holiday. Sun in the sky, sounds of the waves, and if you're feeling too hot, you can just take a dip in the sea. It's a feeling reciprocated by many, including, rather oddly, railway rolling stock. On the night of the 25th of February 1956, an Italian State Railways Class 746 was pulling an evening express along the coast of Italy. Engine number 038 was passing between the stations of Ortona and Tollo-Casona, making good time on the train. Up ahead, however, unbeknownst to the engine's driver, was a small landslide that had spilled onto the tracks as a result of recent rains and the melting snow from winter. Neither the driver or fireman spotted the obstruction until it was too late. The engine ploughed straight into the landslide and jumped off the rails, rolling down the small embankment and into the sea beside the line. Miraculously, nobody was seriously hurt, and none of the carriages derailed, with the locomotive mostly taking the brunt of the impacts and clearing the way for the carriages. When workers came to examine the situation, they found number 038 resting on the beach with its front partially submerged in the water. Being less than 30 meters away from the railway line, and with the locomotive sustaining little damage, it was decided that the best course of action was to recover the engine. That, however, was easier said than done, as the engine had sunk almost a meter into the sand and the tide continued to wash over the front of the locomotive, further submerging it into the beach. The recovery operation began on the 6th of March. Workers began by building a ramp from the rail line down to the beach and laying temporary rails over it. With the tracks in place, the tender was lifted out of the sand with jacks and a wooden support was built beneath it. It was then shifted over to the tracks, where it was lowered onto a temporary set of bogies, having lost its original set during the crash. When no trains were scheduled to pass on the line, the rails were disconnected and joined to the ramp down to the beach, where a 20-ton winch hauled the tender up onto the main line so it could be taken away. The line was then reconnected while work began on moving the engine. The front of the locomotive was still partially submerged in water, and as such, a barrier had to be built around it to stop the sea from getting in the way. Once the barrier was up, the engine had to be dug out of the beach so workers could place jacks beneath it in order to lift it clear of the sand. Sleepers were laid under the engine while inspectors checked the damage to the wheels. If they were too crooked, then it wouldn't be safe to tow the engine and it would have to be broken up on the beach. Safety regulations specified that an engine's wheels couldn't be more than 1.5 millimeters out of line. Some of 038's wheels, however, varied from 5 to 20 millimeters out of line. Given that the engine would be towed to the shed slowly anyway to prevent further damage, the rescue operation continued as planned. By this point, a few days had passed and the barrier was beginning to deteriorate. They'd need to be quick if they wanted to get the engine to safety. Rails were laid under the engine while workers removed the valve gear and coupling rods from the wheels, as salt water had seized them solid. Every oil pot on the engine had a buildup of sand and clay, and had to be cleaned out so the locomotive could be properly lubricated. Slowly, the locomotive was lowered onto the rails and moved backwards towards the ramp. From there, the rails and the engine were rotated to be parallel with the ramp, and the two were connected. It was the 5th of April when two FS 735 locomotives were connected to the beached engine with a 10-meter steel cable in order to tow it up the ramp. Very slowly, 038 was towed off the beach and back onto proper rails. From there, it was stored at a local engine shed before being moved and overhauled at Verona. The temporary tracks were pulled up and the line continued to run as usual. 746-038 was soon put back to work and continued its working life without incident. It has since been preserved and displayed at the Verona Railway Works, recently moving to Pistoia with plans for restoration. A trip to the beach can often be a nice way to unwind and relax for many, but I'm still not entirely sure that it's an appropriate way for locomotives to take a break. Let's hope then that, if 038 does go back into service, it doesn't want to go back to the beach, because it'd certainly be awkward to explain to the passengers that they're going to be late due to the engine wanting to go skinny dipping. Again. Subscribe for more.